Okay, hello everyone and good afternoon. My name is Virendra and I am from RSJ Inspection, and I formally welcome you all for this webinar. First of all, thank you all for taking out your time and attending this webinar on demystifying ESG assurance, what Indian companies must know before BRSR core begins. And I understand that this topic is much more relevant to you as well and much of interesting as well. So I thank and acknowledge everyone who are joining on time. Uh, Before starting the introduction of our speaker, just I want to acknowledge our speaker, Mr. Michael Ray. Uh, so we had a series of this webinar. Today is the third and last webinar, and due to unforeseen season last webinar and this webinar also, Michael is been admitted in the hospital for some or the other reason, and but he has taken out time from the situation, and he's available here for all of us to lead this webinar. So to start with, Michael, thank you very much for your commitment in this area.
No, you're very welcome.
So just to introduce Michael, is staying in South Africa from a quite long time now, and he is having his company IIS, and he's providing the training on the assurance of the sustainability reports. There is a specific training program what we have arranged, which is also we will also share some information about that in the upcoming slides. So, Michael, can I mute you for some time? There is some background noises there.
Oh, is there? Yeah. Mute me. Okay. I may.
Sorry for that. So,
So
Michael,
sorry. I'm just gonna say I just need to maybe move for a quieter place. So let me just go have a look while you're talking.
Yeah. So sorry for that. And as I mentioned, like he's in hospital, so he might not find a proper place quickly so that he can speak in silence, but he's just checking out there. Just to introduce about Michael, he's been long time in South Africa and working in the area of sustainability. He is being an author for many of the sustainability and ESG reports of many of the countries. Also, he is actively participating in providing the assurance of the sustainability reports, and also in the domain of providing the training. And he is carrying over an experience of more than 26 years now in this area, and he has worked in multiple countries, so he is carrying the well-versed experience in the area of assurance. Okay, so about this webinar will be till 4:30 p.m. And after I just complete in 1 or 2 minutes, after that, Michael would be leading this particular webinar in his way. In his way, in the sense like we attended one of the training program of Michael, and we were much more inspired with the way he provides the training, and that's the reason we thought like having Michael here in India for in-person training program. And to have a base for the training program, we thought just to create the awareness to have the series of webinars. And as I said, this is the last webinar in this series. And during the this 90-minute session, Michael will be sharing his experience with respect to the assurance of the ESG reporting. And during the session, you might have some questions or clarifications to ask. So feel free to raise your digital hand and unmute and ask your question at the time. Or you can also note it down your questions and ask them at the end of the session, where we will be having a specific session about the answering the clarifications. And so that's all about the introduction. And so Michael, all set?
Yeah, I'm just moving to where I don't have too much light behind me.
Okay. Now it looks better over there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah. Cool.
Okay, so
Okay.
yeah, Michael, so all done and all is with you now. You can take up this webinar further.
Okay,
Thank you.
superb. Thank you. Okay, so from my side, welcome everybody. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know we all have very busy schedules, but it seems to me that there's quite a bit of interest in this whole area of ESG slash sustainability assurance, which is great because this is something I've been doing for the last 26 years, and it's been slowly. Whereas
All right.
I've seen literally over the last year and a half, there's been
Absolutely.
quite an increase in the pace at with which
Absolutely.
people are coming on board and providing assurance. Oh, sorry, we have someone not on mute here. So yeah, so I've been seeing some exciting stuff. So for instance, last year, April, there were, I believe, just over 230 or 240 certified sustainability assurance practitioners in the world. And if you look at Accountability's database right now, it shows 1,000. Now, you have to take that with a bit of a pinch of salt. It has to have its own assurance because there's lots of duplication within that list, but there's around about 700 to 750 CSAPs now registered around the world. And what that tells me is that the demand for CSAPs is arising. So there has been a slow growth demand for assurance over the past, particularly the last 10, 15 years. But it's been slow and steady. But nobody's actually cared who provides the assurance. For the most part, the accounting firms have been providing the assurance. So your PwCs, your Deloitte's, KPMG, EY, and there's been significant complaints about what those accounting firms provide to the stakeholders. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that all assurance done by accounting firms is not good. It's just that on balance, one of the biggest problems is the assurance statement that they have to write, which is limited by the ISA E3000 standard. So this is the standard for assurance other than financial information. And all accountancy firms are expected to follow this guidance, this standard. And so when you get an assurance statement and it says, this is who we are, this is what we did, these are the responsibilities of the client, et cetera, and it gets down to the end, it comes to a conclusion which states, nothing's come to our attention to lead us to believe that the information is not correct, which is a fairly meaningless conclusion. Because, I'm sitting here and I quite literally am sitting in the entrance to the hospital. And so Netcare, who runs this hospital, used to be a client of mine. And so if I wanted to, if I was doing the assurance for Netcare again, I could just come and sit in this chair at the entrance to Netcare. They're one hospital, one of their many hospitals. And if nobody were to come up to me and raise an issue, then at the end of my audit period, let's just say it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I could write a statement with the conclusion that nothing has come to my attention to lead me to believe that the information is not correct. And that's not what stakeholders need. Stakeholders want someone to go and look at all the information and say, okay, is the information being presented in a fair and factual manner? Is there evidence to support the assertion? And so one of the big assertions is that I always come to is health and safety. So we value the health and safety of our employees. Well, that's not so correct all the times. You see situations where companies they say that they're committed, but then the data that they present indicates that they're having a problem with health and safety, and more people are getting seriously injured. And so as an assurance provider, you have to question the disconnect between the assertion that's made, we're committed to the safety of the employees, and the evidence that's provided, i.e. the performance data. And this is where there was a need identified to create an alternative assurance standard. So back in the 90s, there was an organization called CERES, and these were for corporate environmental reporting. They said, look, there needs to be these standards for comparability. We need to have assurance that allows for comparability between two companies. Because if at the time, if you were looking at a report, a sustainability report issued by Shell, and then you were to go to look at a sustainability report issued by BP, both of them could tell you wonderful stories, but you wouldn't be able to compare whether the one's good stories was better than the other ones. And so there needed to be some metrics in place to be able to measure what good is, which is how from CERES we got the GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative. And so the GRI was spun off from CERES, and the first version of the guidelines, the draft version, which was promulgated back in 1999, came out. It was very, very short, but it came into effect in 2000. And over the past 25 years, it has been expanding to provide more guidance on what companies should be reporting on, both as just being a corporate, but also sector by sector. Because there are very specific, unique sector-specific indicators that one may wish to report on. So, for example, one of my clients is an auto manufacturer. So they produce auto parts for the OEMs, your Toyota, your Volkswagen, your Mercedes, and they have 12 businesses, and they make everything from the wire that then gets used in another business to make wiring harnesses, so that when you put a wiring harness in a truck, in a typical Toyota Hilux now, there's over 125 connection points. And so this one harness connects to the battery and distributes the electricity all the way through the vehicle to these 125 things: the tail lights, the brake lights, the headlights, the indicator lights, the air conditioning, the radio, whatever. There's 125 connections. So you've got these two companies. One makes the wire, one makes the harnesses, but then another one makes the springs. They make leaf springs and coil springs for the suspensions. Another one literally makes the headlights. One makes panels. One makes batteries. And in fact, there's two companies that make batteries, but the batteries are your typical lead acid batteries, your standard car battery. They do make the new generation stop-start batteries that we often get in new cars, where if you come to a robot or a stop and you take your foot off the accelerator, the engine dies. And as soon as you put your foot back on the brake, then it comes back to life again. And those stop-start batteries required very special technology. But the thing to know about this is that in the 12 companies, only the companies that make batteries use or handle lead. And so one of your occupational health and safety indicators would be blood lead levels or blood lead disease. And in the company that makes the batteries, you have to be worried about blood lead exposure and the right PPE and who's doing it and the monitoring, etc. And so if you were to go ahead and you were to look at a set of guidelines of what indicators you ought to report on, a typical set of standards isn't sufficient enough to give you everything that you really should be looking at. So it requires some additional investigation. But at the same time, and as much as I'm not a big proponent of GRI to the level of full application, I do believe in the utility of GRI when writing a first report, regardless of whether it's a new author writing a report or whether it's an author writing a report for a new client. You go back there and it's like your textbooks, it's like your encyclopedias of what to include for a specific company. And so I've been on this path over the many years, seeing that standards by which reporting have improved, and only in the only in 2009 did we get the first assurance standard. And this was because the real gurus of sustainability and the analysts in particular, but the users of the report. Sorry, a message popped up. I didn't see who it was. But the people who are actually using the reports, the investor analysts in particular, were saying, well, this isn't helpful. You know, it's quite possible that the companies are lying to us and we don't know that they're lying. And there's a fairly standard expectation that companies will not tell the truth. So who's going to police these reports to make sure that they are correct? Who's going to police them to make sure that they're consistent, they're produced consistently with their peer companies, so you get that level of comparability? The third element is balance/neutrality. So in the reports, historically, we used to call them corporate citizenship reports or corporate responsibility reports. And a lot of times it was a bunch of photographs of the CEO doing wonderful things like handing out Christmas gifts to kids in December. And they'd go and at the beginning of the school year, they'd go to the schools and they'd hand out school kits, you know, pens and paper and all that sort of stuff. And they'd take these photographs and they'd just publish them all through these reports. And that's a term that we called poverty pornography, where these poor kids in the poor areas getting access to these things that they otherwise wouldn't have access to, that they're going ahead and giving them to them as if this is some magical, you know, Santa-like gift, rather than saying this is a need in our community that we ought to fulfill. Because if we're ever going to expect to be able to hire these kids when they're finished school, they need the academic start that only we can help support. So we must support their education because it's strategic for our business, not because we just want to look good. And so these reports have been evolved to expect balance or neutrality. So you can't just talk about the good things. You must talk about the bad things. So for example, if you said that you have let's just say an injury frequency rate of 1.0. So 1.0 per 200,000 person hours worked is actually the equivalent of 1 out of every 100 people being injured to the point of 1 day. And in South Africa, I could tell you that a target of 1.0 is very high. You know, some of our most dangerous companies, their target is 0.10. But at the same time, we have companies like real estate companies, Pick and Pay, ShopRite, Woolworths. These are all, you know, food and clothing retailers. And they have lost time injury frequency rates as high as 1.8. So 18 times more dangerous than South Africa's largest oil and gas company, which is absurd because they're not considering the comparability elements and the consistency. And so what a user of a report would expect is that you provide the data exactly the same way everybody else provides the data. And then before anybody asks the question, why are you so dangerous? You should be including in the report an explanation of why your lost time injury frequency rate is so high. And so that should already be there, the positive and the negative. So the balance or neutrality. So reporting really started around the 3 principles of comparability. What was it? Balance, neutrality, and sorry, my mind is just skipping me. Balance, neutrality, and materiality. Sorry. Materiality is the most important thing because there's no sense in writing a report if you're not going to just tell people what is most important to your company. And so you have to be able to demonstrate that there's been a process for which you've identified what the most material risks and opportunities are for the organization. And I've never met a company that doesn't do some form of materiality assessment. A lot of companies don't go far enough with it because for most companies, the materiality assessment is equal to the risk register. And the risk register is done by the financial guys, the the audit and the finance and audit committees. But they're not looking at things the way other stakeholders are in terms of, okay, it may not cost us money in the immediate terms, but the potential for it having massive impacts on society are huge, like water. In most countries, and particularly in emerging markets, we do not pay the full cost of our water. And you come to South Africa and you see the struggles that we're having now with water infrastructure. And it's because for the last 20 odd years, the government has not been reinvesting money in maintaining the infrastructure. And so we now have two types of sheddings. We have load shedding, which is electricity shedding, and we have water shedding, which means that you can expect on a regular basis for them to turn off the water, turn off the electricity, and you're back in the dark ages, which is horrendous for the people at the bottom of the pyramid. Because someone like myself, I've been able to afford to put in backup systems. So from a water perspective, I'm secure for 10 days. From an electricity perspective, I'm good to go for as long as whatever. So with zero water input, I'm okay for 10 days in my household. But the average person living in South Africa hasn't got that. So what has been expected is that the reports become far more than just a list of bits of information. Yes, we have a human rights policy. Yes, we have we don't have child labor. Yes, we allow for unionization. Yes, we hire women. Yes, we hire persons with disabilities. Whatever the issues are, you expect that there's, okay, we do that. But the question becomes, so what? Like, when you say that you hire persons with disabilities, do you know what the right target is? Because in South Africa, our Stats South Africa, our sort of government statistics agency, they report that the average that 7.5% of the total workable population, 7.5% are disabled in one form or another. But in the workforce, only 1% of the workforce is disabled, which means that we have a disabled person's unemployment rate of 86.7%. And so, are there reasonable expectations for people to hire persons with disabilities? Because in many cases, persons with disabilities are the right people to hire. And I've run this experiment in a few companies now where my clients were dealing with noise-induced hearing loss. And they kept having problems with people losing more and more of their hearing. And if you've never experienced this in your career thus far, what happens is, if you know you're going to be going and working in an area that's noisy, they do a baseline assessment and they check your hearing. And then on no less than an annual basis, they'll recheck your hearing and calculate a percent loss of hearing, or what's referred to as a PLH shift. When you get to 10%, it means that you've significantly lost your hearing, and now their compensation has to be paid because now the person is, quote unquote, disabled. And so the companies are expected to monitor the PLH shift on an annual basis to prevent cases where people are losing their hearing. Now, in order to avoid that, one of the ways is you give people PPE. So you wear earplugs, right? So you might start with a little earplug like this. If that's not working, you then go and move to an area with less exposure to noise. And if that's not working, there's something else afoot and you have to investigate. It could be that the person has the largest car stereo in the smallest car and they blare their music all the way home. And so that the hearing loss has nothing to do with the company, but the company is being, if you will, branded as being the cause of this. But I say, if you are a company that knows that you have the potential for giving people hearing loss, Why don't you just hire deaf people? Like, you know, their hearing's already screwed. You're going to save a lot of money on PPE. And one of the massive benefits of hiring deaf people, particularly in manufacturing environments, is they tend to be far more productive than their hearing peers because they're not distracted by all the noises and the conversations that are happening around them. And as I say, we've run this experiment. I've run it in 3 different countries, and it's been amazing to see the change. This is all the role of an assurance provider. An assurance provider is meant to go and ask a bunch of questions, starting with a really useful framework. And so we started with the AA1000, which was released in 2009. The one that is most commonly used was only really formally came out in 2013. That's the ISAE3000. And it's because the accounting firms have been trying to protect their own business, their own market. They want to corner the market on this. And what I find really interesting is that if you read through the BRSR, it actually speaks about accountancy firms and how accountancy firms could do this, but not necessarily be the best at it unless they partner with the technical skills that are required to actually do the assurance properly, which opens the door, unlike in any other country that I've seen, it opens the door for very specific invitations for companies to use the ISAE 1000 standard, so the AA1000 AS standard, which is much more favorable to the users of the report. And so I'm going to come back to that a little bit later. For now, I just want to start and say, okay, so any questions? So this is your time. You've all dialed in here. It looks like we've got quite a few people dialed in. This is your time. You've come with a very specific reason or interest. If it's just general knowledge, that's fine. I understand that. But does anybody have a very specific question you'd like to pose right off the bat? Just put your hand up and go ahead. I'm not seeing any hands. Okay. I'm assuming everybody. Oh, here we go. I'm gonna hope I get this right. Panasami. Yeah, you're on mute there.
Yeah, hi, very good afternoon. Actually, sorry, I'm joining from a different organization, but yeah, it's very insightful to understand this thing. So the thing is like, I'm not basically a reporting practitioner, but actually what I'm is like, I'm like a solid waste management specialist.
Yep.
So I know this is like kind of a holistic combination of different, various departments inputs that finally goes into as a report, or like that goes into the reporting basically, than to say it as
Yep.
a report. So I am finding this challenge wherein like uh, since I'm like particularly more focusing on the solid waste management, so I'm finding this
Yep.
challenge where like how to fit into this market. So I know this question is not appropriate, but I'm just and there are a lot of things to do like in line with the waste management on the sustainability side, or all the other various parameters that can be like have its own impact in terms of reporting. So could you please touch something on
Yep.
that?
So I disagree. You're in the right place because most companies, so most large companies, and anybody with a large environmental footprint. So if you're a mining company, a manufacturing company, whatever, waste management is a big thing. So even in one of my clients, which is a hotel chain, well, it's a casino chain with hotels, waste management is a big thing because the casinos make most of their money from a very small number of people, what we refer to as whales, big gamblers. But in order to attract these big gamblers to come and drop $1 million, $10 million a night, they require services that can support the family coming. And those are hotels, they're theme parks, they're water slides, there's golf courses, there's all sorts of stuff. to try and attract people to get to the tables at night. And what these hotels and casinos are now competing for is conference events. And they compete primarily around environmental sustainability. And so most of the casinos that you would find in South Africa have a zero waste to landfill target. And understanding how that zero waste to landfill target has to integrate with the full ESG reporting is very important, because you have to follow the same procedure. It's the policies, procedures, systems, and controls. Have you set a policy for zero waste to landfill? What does that mean? Does it mean 100% of waste has to go someplace other than landfill? Does it mean that only non-hazardous, non-recyclable materials cannot go to landfill? You have to explain what it is, but then you have to be able to demonstrate that these policies are put in place through standard operating procedures, so that at the end of the day you can measure whether you got to the target of zero. And so if you're doing, so you're WSP, I'm quite familiar with WSP, very, very highly respected. Oh, you're not? Are you just stealing their background?
No, sorry, like I just forgot to change my background
Okay.
actually, and just I'm noticing. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, no, that's fine. But if you're in that space, then what your objective is to make sure that everything that you do from a waste management perspective blends nicely into the whole reporting sphere. And so understanding what is expected from assurance. So can you demonstrate that you have the policies, procedures, systems, and controls in place? Can you demonstrate that the definitions that you use for certain things are the same as everybody else's definitions, i.e., are you meeting the principle of comparability or consistency? You know, are you reporting on that which you must and that which you must not? Because there's sometimes there's waste that would have to be included because it's your waste, and waste you wouldn't because it's not. It's kind of like the same as Scope 1, Scope 3 carbon emissions, right? Scope 3 carbon emissions to me are a complete waste of time. Like, what should be happening with Scope 3 carbon emissions is the big suppliers in the supply chain should be reporting their Scope 1 and Scope 2. And if they are, then if I was to report my Scope 3, then all we're doing is double accounting. But you have to have all of those things in place, and you have to be able to generate a report that can withstand the rigors of assurance. Someone to actually test the information, particularly the data, at its source. And that's what these things are really, really require. So I'm going to bounce over here. Before I come back to you, so Manoj Kumar, I'm going to go to Sunil. Sunil, you were there and then you dropped?
Yeah. So I have one small question. In fact, when we are going through any assurance engagement, and usually then we start, drafting the assurance statement after completion of the on-site verification of ESG data. Then we consider some fundamental, parameters and the components of the assurance statement as per the ISE 3000 revised standard, or recently it is ISSA 5000 or AA1000 AS. So usually we write with respect to the the responsibilities of the organization, those who are reporting the data, scope, boundaries, then their KPI disclosures. We also write about the what are the limitations are there. We also write about the assurance providers' responsibilities, methodology, and so on. And conclusion is the last parameter which we write it, and our independence and impartiality related statement. Now these are the common components which are universally drafted by many assurance provider, and as a part of unbiased, impartial, independent, and unbiased statement, we would like to balance it with the help of some pitfalls, some areas where organization identified the opportunity for the improvement, some loopholes, some lapses in the system. Somewhere we have found that there could be the further scope of strengthening a particular area. It might be with respect to the social responsibility, it might be with respect to the greenhouse gas, or might be with respect to maybe life cycle assessments and so on. There are a lot of things, renewable energy utilization, or a lot of things which we can sensitize by considering the nature, scale, and size of the organization in which ecosystem our organization is working. But whenever we submit such type of assurance statement to the customer, then as you know that this statement is going into a public domain, and they dislike that their pitfalls and the such type of stories or such type of recommendations or opportunity of improvements are going into public domain, and they as a the reporting organization ask the the us as a verifier or assurance provider not to write that as a part of that. And we feel means we try at our best to defend, and we say that it is unbiased, this is an area of improvement, this is a area where we are trying to show the action plans, and you are a emerging organization, your aspirations we are explaining as a part of that, and how you are improving in terms of the ESG performance and so on. So a lot of reasoning which we are giving them, but still few of the clients are so robust that they don't want anything and so on. So we lose a lot of connects. So what is
Okay,
your
so
suggestion?
okay, so two things. Number one is you must always remember that there's a difference between a management report and
Yeah,
an assurance statement. So the bulk of the discussion that you'd be having there would fall in the management report, the assurance management report. And that's a document that goes between you and the client. You are obligated as an independent assurance provider to make statements if information is not correct. So there's two things here. Number one is, one of the ways to avoid this is to make sure that you do site visits in Q3, or sorry, Q4, not Q1. If you do it early on in Q4, you have Q1 through Q3 data to review. And if you find problems, you still have another 3 months for the information to be fixed prior to it being finalized for inclusion in the sustainability report. So timing of assurance is very critical. Number two, if there's a foundational systemic problem that requires longer to fix, then how you actually state the qualification is very important. You have to be very sensitive. And so one of the things that you would say is, so you have a section on findings, recommendations, and conclusions. And the finding could be that that the lost time injury frequency rate for the year is higher than it has been for the past 3 years. And then you could say, but this should be taken in the context of the fact that the company has significantly improved the way in which they collect, collate, and report injuries, inclusive of contractors and not just employees. It is expected that in future years, this will be rectified, and that the current year's data should not be considered purely comparable to historical data. Sorry, I have the hiccups here. Should not be considered purely comparable to the prior year data. So there's ways that you can talk around these problems without lying that doesn't come off as a total negative for the client. But then what you do is you unpack those like one or two sentences and you put it in the management report and you explain what you mean by what has to be done. And so it might mean that like typically if I find a problem like that, one of the first things I do is I work with the client to try and go back and fix the historical numbers and restate them so that the trend does not look so bad. But if you restate, you must make a restatement. That restatement doesn't happen in the assurance statement, it happens in the report. But then your overall conclusion is, based on the work performed and accepting the anomaly or anomalies identified above, we believe that the information presented within this report is fair and factual. And that's the level of detail that you need to go to in that public document. You don't need to give the whole story, who's to blame and what happened and all of that. That's reserved for the management. Sorry, the management report.
Yes, well
And
noted.
it's yeah, and so it's, should a stakeholder want more information, they can absolutely request additional information from the company, not from you, but from the company. But what you're then going to do is next year's assurance, you're going to go back to your notes and you're going to say, we identified this last year. We recommended these two things last year. Have you actually fixed the job? And if not, why not? Because again, there could be reasonable explanations for why it hasn't yet been fixed. But this here is it's a fundamental difference between ISAE 3000 and AA1000. ISAE 3000 and the new version ISSA 5000 is and I think BRSR has its own version of ISSA 3000. But these are all verifications. They're not assurance. Verification is you go and you check the data to make sure that the data is correct. And in many cases, they only test for two things. One is accuracy and one is reliability. And so accuracy is this. Before you get to a site, you ask them for the baseline data. And the baseline data might be, we used 100 liters of petrol, we used 200 liters of diesel, we used 3 tons of coal, we had 5 lost time injuries, we had this, we had that. So they send you the baseline data for a set of selected sustainability performance indicators. Then you go to the site and you now check the information at source to determine whether the information is accurate or not. And so you say, okay, so where did you get this information from? Okay, well, we get our electricity consumption data from our electricity invoices. And you say, okay, so give me those electricity invoices. And you use your own Excel and you add it up. And the question is, if you add up the 12 months of electricity consumption, does it come to the same number as what they've reported for their year's electricity consumption? So does the sum of the parts equal the whole? If it doesn't, then you got to go and figure out where things went wrong. And you have to play, detective in many of these things. And as a really good detective, you should be asking all sorts of really stupid questions. You should not try to pretend to know anything, regardless of how knowledgeable you are. Because when you avoid the stupid questions, you often miss opportunities to identify where there are problems that the company is dealing with that they don't actually know they're dealing with. And so you get them to explain, and as they're explaining, what you're doing is you're running this in parallel in your mind as to, okay, so is that similar to what everybody else does? Or have I seen anybody else do it this way? If I've seen people do it this way, has it worked out well or has it led to problems? If it led to problems, what were the problems and how do we fix this situation here? So remember, to be truly effective, you want to be doing the site visits in Q4 so that if problems arise, if you identify issues, there is some time for the client to fix the data prior to it going into the report. So that's accuracy. The consistency is the definitions. So one of the most basic ones is lost time injury frequency rate. Historically, everybody used to report on lost time injuries per 1 million person hours worked. And the reason for that was very, very, very basic. Pre-computers, where if you had a million people working 200,000 person hour, or 2,000 hours a year, then you had what do you got? 2 billion person hours. That's a big number to be using as a divider. So you have to divide by 1 million. And it's linear because all you have to do is remove 6 digits. But we use 200,000 because it makes more sense. Globally, the average person gets 2 weeks of leave a year. So out of a 52-week year, you only work 50 weeks. Globally, the average person works 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. So 8 times 5 is 40 hours per week, multiplied by 50 weeks. That's 2,000 hours. 100 people working 200,000 hours equals, 100 people working 2,000 hours equals 200,000 hours. So when we present a lost time injury frequency rate of, let's just say, 1.0, it means that 1.0 out of every 100 people got injured to the point of losing at least 1 day. Now, many companies in their annual reporting will tell you that their lost time injury frequency rate is say let's just say it's 5.0. And you're comparing that. And so you got 1 company, 2 companies, 3 companies, 4 companies, and you're comparing this. If some of them are reporting per million hours and some of them are reporting per 200,000, the person that's reporting 5 is equal to the person who's reporting 1, because 5 at 1 million is equal to 1 at 200,000. And so we must always use consistent definitions. I'll give you another example. Water. So, it's a very bad business strategy, but I fire clients all the time. So, when I say fire clients, I mean I just let them know that I'm not going to work with them ever again if they're doing something that I believe is completely wrong. So 2 years ago, I did assurance for a Canadian mining company. They're mining gold in Namibia. So Namibia, for those of you who don't know, is primarily made up of the Namib Desert. It is one big, massive desert. And there's gold and uranium deposits in Namibia. And in order to access those deposits, you need water. Even at the exploration and drilling stage, you need water. And so this Canadian mining company goes off into the desert and is drilling holes, core samples, to try and find where best to set up their mine. And so they have these big water tankers, and they go and they fill up at a river or a stream or a borehole, and they truck it kilometers away, and then they mix the water with chemicals, and they use it for cooling the drills. So as the drill is going down, it heats up, and so they are pushing this liquid down underground to cool the drills. And the company in the report stated, we have successfully maintained our target of 0 water consumption. And I'm like, no. You used a lot of water. Like, I literally saw multiple 22,000 liter tankers coming to your site. And they said, but we didn't use that water. And I was like, wait a second. I saw the guys mix it with the chemicals and then pump it underground. And they said, yeah. But because we pumped it back underground, it's no longer used, because we took it from the ground, we moved it, and we put it back underground. Anybody got a problem with that? So there's more than one problem. There are 3 problems with that argument. Can anybody figure out what the 3 problems are with that argument?
Contamination of groundwater level.
Sorry?
Contamination of groundwater level. That's the first thing.
100%, because they're mixing it with chemicals and putting it underground. So they're contaminating the new groundwater area. Yeah. Number 2.
Yeah.
Whatever water they are taking out and whatever they are giving back needs to be measured, because there can be evaporation losses also.
Number 2, there's going to be evaporation, because what are they using the water for? Cooling, right? You pour essentially cold water on hot metal and it's going to evaporate, right? So you're not going to have the same volume of water going underground as you took from underground. So there's that loss. What's the third one?
Not sure, but from wherever they are extracting water, there can be an ecological impact.
There's certainly, absolutely, because basically you're taking the water from one location and putting it into another. So you're not returning it to its source, you're returning it to the earth. And there could be very different aquifers, very different ecologies in place. So it's not going back to where it came from in the form it came out and in the volume that came out. But this company was adamant, and they had been reporting this way for a couple of years already. And I was like, absolutely no way am I pinning my brand to a company that is lying about water use in the middle of a desert. Totally absurd. And so definitions have to be very, very, very clear, and they have to be consistent with what everybody else is doing. Any other questions? I want to go back. There was somebody. Tip. I can find them again.
Yeah, in fact, yeah. So answer with respect to the management report found appropriate, while in order to mitigate the risk, because there are a lot of risks which we need to also cover up as a part of assurance statement. So if we found that as a part of our verification, there are a lot of errors identified into a data. So we then write that organizations should conduct the internal audits, or they should have the the online portal to capture all these ESG related data. So this type of opportunities of improvement somehow could safeguard the assurance provider that okay, he identified and therefore he given this as the opportunity for the improvement, while in detail we are mentioning as a part of management report where we are writing the actual clauses and actual locations where we identified such type of issues.
Exactly. So one of the things there is that a recommendation of putting in a data management system, so a sustainability data management system, is very, very common. I used to actually help build systems for clients. So I would have an assurance client, I would fire them as an assurance client, and then work with a business partner of mine to develop a data management system. Because what I was finding through the assurance is that we were running into the same pitfalls year after year after year, where the quality of the data was very poor because it wasn't being managed on an ongoing basis. And so you needed a data management system that allowed for the control part of it. Remember, policies, procedures, systems, and controls. The control part of it is sign off. So escalation and sign off. So where the person who collects the data should not be the person who submits the data and or signs off on it. There should be a linkage. And the person who signs off on the data has to be in a position of management. And one of those management jobs is to, number one, make sure that the people who are supposed to be giving the data are doing so on time, and that the data that they're giving is accurate and consistent and complete. And so that's a reasonable, it's just how you write it. It's, again, it's findings, recommendations, and conclusions. So findings, you could say that the overall accuracy of the data is good, but it's somewhat hindered by the absence of an effective data management system. We recommend that the company invest in no less than a basic SQL Server database to eliminate the need for spreadsheets and adopting an online database management system. That's the recommendation. Now, the client, they don't have to follow up on that. You've made the recommendation. It's there for people to see. And if the problems keep happening, then they've only got themselves to blame. If you've got a really good client where you present to the audit and what is it, let's just say the audit committee, and you're presenting and you present this, what you'll find is that the chair of the audit committee would turn and say, well, hold on a second. If we have a data management system for our finances, why don't we have a data management system for our sustainability data? And how much is this going to cost us? And how long is it going to take? And then, Michael, would you mind helping us identify an effective service provider? To which I would say, yes. I'm not going to identify one. I'm going to identify three, because one of them is one that I work with a lot because they give best value for money. But I have to give you the options. That's the conversation that comes out of an assurance program and ending effectively, where you actually have that conversation, say, okay, so what needs to be fixed, and what do you think the best way of doing it is? Because then you have on record that you've had that conversation. So next year they can't come back to say, yeah, but you audited this last year and you said everything was fine. And you can say, no, that's not what I said. If we go back to our records, here's the management report.
ये तो आप अगली वीक खरीद रहे हैं महाराष्ट्र में, और अगस्त मंथ में कैसा शेड्यूल है?
Oh, sorry, we have someone.
Yeah, I think
okay.
I got a means complete answer of both the questions together. I was just trying to ask one small thing, is that for a reasonable level of assurance, we are considering 33% of the total volume of the data, while for the limited assurance, we are considering the 10% of the total volume of the data. Is this sampling is okay, or shall we need to increase the sampling for the reasonable level of assurance?
So it depends on how you take this. So there are no hard and fast rules on this. There are some various what's the word I'm looking for here? There are various guidelines on this. But when you're looking at assurance shouldn't be looked at as a 1 year once-off engagement, unless it's one company with one operation. But if you're dealing with a company like a mining company, say with 10 different mines, you would expect to cycle through those mines over a 4-year period with a minimum assurance cycle of 5 years. And over those 5 years, you should be able to cover more than 80% of all source data. So not every indicator, but within the indicators that are selected as the most material, you should be able to cover no less than 80% of all of the data. And so what you do is when you are conducting or determining which assurance sites to visit, you are choosing them based on, first, who has the highest amount of impact on the total amount of data. And then work forward. Yes. So the other thing, and so in the first couple of years, you're only going to be able to give limited assurance, but then you ramp it up to We go from moderate to reasonable. Sorry.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have considered the 33% means 3 years of assurance cycle, and 100% data will be verified in a cycle of 3 years.
As long as that company is small enough to accommodate the site visits to gather 100%.
Absolutely. So what we are doing in that 33% volume of data, we are taking, if it is a very big organization located maybe in many countries together, so we are capturing the sample data wherein all BUs are being considered, one representative from the each BU, and the remaining data which we are verifying remotely.
Yeah. So in some cases, you may not need all BUs because, for example, if you have a company that makes well, let's go back to my Metair. Metair makes auto parts, but they now have a new division which is retail, and so they now put tires and brakes and lights and stuff on cars. So they have like a service centers. Those service centers, in terms of the overall data, the head count, the energy consumption, the waste, all of that, all of the service centers combined make up less than one of their other manufacturing sites. And so you may, the data at each one of those sites is so small that you would never actually go out to the service centers. But what you would do is you'd review the service centers at their divisional head office. And so it's that KISS principle. You have to keep it simple, stupid. Right? You gotta make sure that you're not overcomplicating the assurance process. Absolutely, you must be committed to looking at all of the data. One of my clients in the past, one of my very first clients, which I ultimately worked with a guy to develop a data management system for, had 112 different companies in 30 countries in multiple sectors with over 130,000 employees. They had over 500 data points. And so I was looking at over 68,000 individual data points in order to provide assurance over their work. And so that doesn't mean that you're going and testing all 68,000 data points or whatever it was. It means that you are population sampling to get a sense that things are being done properly. And so in your assurance statement, it's imperative that you make it very clear what you've done, where you've done it, and how you've done it. And this is where, like, Accountability's AA1000, I believe, adds some real value. Because a properly written AA1000 assurance statement gives the user, the intended user of the report, that information. So you're expected to say, I went here, here, and here. These are the indicators that I looked at. This is how we conducted our review. These are our findings, our recommendations, and our conclusions, etc. And so an assurance statement written under AA1000, it's a challenge to get it to under 3 pages, fully DTP'd, i.e. laid out in a printed report. My typical assurance statement is 4 pages in Word, 10-point font, single spaced. So sorry, I just want to go, Sunil Katuria. Earlier you had your hand up. I'm just wondering whether you have a question.
I was wondering, first of all, good evening.
Yeah, good evening there, Sunil.
And I was wondering how this whole process of assurance as applicable to the organizations, how this process can also be applicable to some of the great events like we have a annual cricket bonanza IPL taking place every year in India, or FIFA taking place every 4 years, or Wimbledon. Can the same assurances be applicable to these events?
Yes, 100%. Because an event will have specific targets. So again, you think of green conferencing. So Sun International, this casino group that I spoke of earlier, their whole sustainability helped them become the green conference provider of choice. And so their waste management, their zero waste to landfill, one of their casinos, hotels became the very first zero waste to landfill hotel in South Africa, and it very large with a golf course, the whole bit. And so conference organizers wanted to host the conference at this venue because the people who were participating wanted to know that there was a low carbon footprint, a low water footprint, a low waste footprint. And so it became a strategic imperative for them. And so now when competing for events, if you look at the bids that go into any of the big global sporting events, whether it's a domestic thing like the IPL, you would expect that venues are competing on much more than just the number of seats for butts and the cost, how much they're going to charge. They're going to also include things like what's our carbon footprint per butt in seat. What's our impact on local water infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they set out these targets, and then they report back on them, and then the assurance provider comes in to say yes or no. Is this information correct?
As well as there is
so go ahead.
There is a
Thank
standard.
you. Thank you very much.
No worries.
You can see in the chat box. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. So Borkar, you were about to say something?
Yeah, I was just saying that there is a standard called as a Sustainable Event Management Standard, ISO 20121, which can be considered to disclose your ESG parameters, how you are planning your aspects, and how you are integrating sustainability, and that can be verified and assured.
But don't forget that ISO talks about how you're going to do it, not how you've done.
Yeah, means ISO 20121 is a framework.
So it's very useful in saying, okay, we have the systems and controls in place, we've trained our people, etc. But it's different from the output.
Yeah,
so one of the most common complaints from any of the big environmental NGOs like Greenpeace or World Wildlife Fund or any of those is that the companies who when they go and they pick their worst environmental performers, over 80% of those companies have an ISO flag hanging out in front of their offices. And it's because they've gone ahead and they put all these policies and procedures in place, but at the end of the day, they don't actually use these to manage performance. And what we're looking at in terms of sustainability or ESG assurance is the performance. Are companies telling the truth about their performance on all these key issues? So I want to go to Gautam Ray. Your hand's been up for a bit, and I'll go to
thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. Yep.
So I just wanted to understand once again how the data quality can affect the level of assurance.
It doesn't. You can have bad data. You can have bad data and still good assurance. Because the role of the assurance is to confirm or refute whether the information is correct. A good assurance could be that the information presented this year has demonstrated some significant shortfalls in terms of accuracy, consistency, or completeness. This information has been identified by the company, and new processes are being put in place to ensure that the quality of the data improves next year. That's the assurance statement. Because sometimes, even if you get in there 3 months early, remember, go in Q4, even if you get in there in Q4 and you still aren't able to tie up the data properly, then you have to make a qualification. But what that does as a positive is it allows the company to tell its stakeholders that we've got you. We understand your concerns. We've identified the problem and we're fixing it. Come speak to us next year and we'll show you how we fixed it. And so what it does is it takes the wind out of the sails of any pirates that are going to come and try and hijack the company's reputation. And so one must not be afraid of bad data, especially in year one, because the identification of bad data in year one demonstrates that as a company, you're committed to getting things right. Where you want to be scared is if the data is still bad in years 2, 3, and 4, because then it just is a demonstration that the company just doesn't care. And that's another one of those times when I fire my clients. If they're not willing to actually fix things, then I'm out. I'm not here just to give rubber stamps. Okay, I'm going to try and pronounce this right. Narendra Varma.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Michael.
Yep, go ahead.
So just to add on to your earlier response to what Manoj sir has asked for in sampling sites for verification or assurance.
Yep.
In case, say, where we have selected 2 out of 5 sites for verification.
Yep.
Okay. And during the process, we identified gaps and we addressed it through course correction during audit or after audit. So how should we handle the remaining 3 sites that were not part of verification? Means since it is a limited level of assurance that were not verified.
Okay, so
there would be a possibility of.
So go back again. So what are you saying?
See, if we have selected 2 out of 5 sites for verification and address the gaps that were identified during the audit proceedings. So how do we handle the remaining 3 sites that were not verified since verification did not take place there now? So there could be a possibility of errors or inconsistency for those sites.
No. Desktop review. So if you have a company, so your client has, say, 5 manufacturing sites, and you're going to go and test the data at source at the 2 largest, the 2 with the greatest social and/or environmental impacts. Those are your first 2. You're going to cycle through all 5 over the course of a 3-year cycle. You may actually have a 4th cycle where you go back and revisit if there were 1 or 2 what really performed poorly. But during every year, you're still going to get the data and you're going to review it for reasonability at the desktop level. Which means that if you get the data and water consumption is 100 liters every single month, 100 liters, 100 liters, 100 liters, 100 liters, then all of a sudden in October, it's 1,000 liters. You're going to see that anomaly jump out at you. What you're going to do is you're then going to pick up the phone and call the person who provided that data and say, please, can you explain what happened where we went from 100 liters to 1,000 liters? Because it could be a reasonable response. It could be, oh, yeah, we had to drain the swimming pool at the hotel or at the guest house, and we had to refill it. So it took us an extra 1,000 liters that month. And you say, okay, that's fine. So at the desktop level, you review all of the data, including the stuff that's not part of your KPIs. Like literally within my assurance engagements, we are often reviewing 200 data points or more for 10 to 10 to 15 business operations. And all we're doing for the bulk of it is we're doing reasonability testing. We're looking at the data month by month for that reporting period. And then we're taking that reporting period total and comparing it against the previous 5 reporting periods. And so you get these trend analyses. And when you get the trends, you see these anomalies and you ask the question, what happened here? So no data goes unlooked or unchecked.
So, but in that limited time which is available, so we end up verifying 2, and the rest 3 will be done through the internal team of the client. And finally, what happens is if they will end up reporting erratic readings which have happened due to the typographical error done by their team. So will that be okay? How do we deal with such situations?
So again, you're trying to find them, right? So at the site, like when you write your assurance statement, you would say that we review all of the data for these indicators, but we go specifically to these 2 sites for the on-site inspection for testing data at source. When you're at source, you're expecting to be able to find what problems could arise that lead to data inaccuracies or anomalies. Then back at your office, and you've got all the data for all of the sites. Then what you're able to do is look at the data, find the anomalies, and then have a conversation with the people responsible for that data and ask them to explain. Based on your experience at the sites, you might be able to say, if they can't answer the question, say, well, what are the chances that this happened? So let me give you an example, okay? Going back to the very same client, the casino client. So different casino, but like the other casinos, there's a big hotel and there's entertainment to attract the families to come, to keep the families busy while the whale is off, losing millions of dollars. And in this facility, there's an ice rink. So I don't know how many of you guys have ever been on an ice rink, but I'm Canadian. So I grew up on an ice rink. And it's cold in an ice rink. And the premise is you take a bunch of water and you freeze it on the ground. You make it a nice smooth surface so that you can play hockey or lacrosse or curling or any sorts of games, figure skating, whatever. And so in order to make the ice, you have to have one big, massive refrigeration system. Now, this is an Olympic-size skating rink. So if you're to watch ice hockey or figure skating in the Olympics, you're going to watch it on the same size rink. So it's a big rink. In the casino, this is considered a concessionaire. So the casino doesn't own the ice rink. The casino rents the space to a company that has the ice rink, and they operate the ice rink. And so the ice rink is expected to pay its own bills, its rent, its water consumption, its electricity consumption, etc. Just outside the ice rink, there's the food court. And the food court has a KFC and a McDonald's and a whatever, a bunch of restaurants. And as I'm going through and I'm looking at the electricity consumption data as a key component of the Scope 1 emissions or Scope 2 emissions for the group, I see that KFC is using roughly 100 times more electricity than the ice rink. And I'm sitting there going, there's absolutely no way that a KFC, which doesn't even have its own restaurant, it's just a takeaway spot, this little kiosk, there's no way that this KFC is using 100 times more electricity than the ice rink. And so anomaly. And so I go to the electrical engineer and I say, can you explain this? And he says to me, and I kid you not, I'll never forget this. He says, well, what you don't understand about an ice rink is that you must first get the temperature down, and you must freeze the water until it's ice. And then all you need to do is keep all of the hot air away so that the ice doesn't melt. So that's why we have, the windows are all closed. There's big plastic doorways that keep the cold out. There's multiple level barriers, blah, blah, blah. And he says, so once the ice is frozen, then we don't have to worry about it. And I'm like, you're in Cape Town in December. It's 34 degrees out. There's absolutely no way that this is what happens. And so cut a long story short, I go to the meters where they get their data, and I see a meter for KFC, and I see a meter for Nando's, and I see a meter for the ice cream place, and I see a meter for the ice rink. And all of the meters look the same, except on the ice rink where you have those numbers, those dial numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Underneath those numbers, printed on the meter, was times 100. When they were recording the electricity consumption, they were recording the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but then weren't adding the extra digits. And so they were under-reporting the electricity consumption by a factor of 100, which meant that they were charging the ice rink people 1% of the total electricity bill. And this one little anomaly ultimately found millions of dollars in unbilled electricity costs. The company, unfortunately, ended up having to write off this loss, because if they were to go after the concessionaire would have gone bankrupt because they didn't generate that much money. Because when they set the pricing for the ice rink, the pricing was based on the costs, including the electricity, but they were only paying for 1/100th of the electricity cost. And so the patrons, the users of the ice rink, they were getting off scot-free. They were paying far less than they should. But ultimately, this had to be fixed. And so this, again, the role of the assurance provider. You have to ask all sorts of questions. You have to make no assumptions about what you may or may not know. Because you have to first let them explain and have that, ruminate in your brain to determine, well, does that make sense? Does it make sense that an ice rink uses less electricity than a KFC, than a fast food restaurant? And if not, what's the problem? And so in that case, in that year, they reported the electricity consumption as it should have been reported. We corrected the number, and then we added a restatement. And so stating that all historical data could not be relied upon because the process through which the data was collected, collated, reporting had been deemed ineffective. Did that answer the question there?
Yeah. So just to reconfirm, even if we are taking up those 3 sites which were not visited outside, we still have to undergo that has to undergo a remote assessment as an overview.
Yes, because at the end of the day, the number that you're assuring is the total number in the report.
Okay, but that again requires an additional effort where we also have to fetch the evidences to verify those reported data.
No.
Not required.
So no, you don't. Unless there's a problem that you identify, then you'd seek the evidence.
Okay.
So it may not even be a problem. It's an anomaly. So the number is correct. It just looks odd. So as I say, suddenly the reporting from 100 liters of of water a month to 1,000 liters of water, and it's because they filled up the pool. So you ask the question, and they say, oh, here it is, and here's our water bill. That's the month that we refilled our pool. So now you have that one piece of evidence. You don't need the evidence for the rest of the year. You just need that one piece of evidence that confirms that when they say it's because we refilled our pool, you can confirm, yes, it's because they refilled the pool.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So as I say, as you have to remember that when you're assuring a sustainability report, you're assuring the very last number, the total, grand total of all water, grand total of all scope 1 emissions, grand total of all scope 2 emissions. So you have to look at all of the data that builds up to that grand total, but then you population sample based on sites and or months.
Okay, by that way, we may miss some of the data points which have been entered.
100%, 100%. And that may be something that you find out in year 2 when you do a site visit at another location. But then you make a statement about that in the following year.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
No worries. Anybody else? And let me show you something here. You can all see my slideshow here?
Yeah, it's visible.
Visible.
Okay. 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 Lost time injury frequency rates. Okay. So typically you would expect that companies with high physical involvement like mining, it's going to have a high lost time injury frequency rate. So again, this is the number of lost time injuries per 200,000 person hours worked. Okay. And so we track this as in South Africa, we track this for all of the JSE listed companies. And what we find is the company with the highest lost time injury frequency rate in the metals and mining sector is Harmony Gold at 1.106. The average for the sector is only 0.307, which means Harmony is 3 times more dangerous than the average mining company on the JSE. What's also interesting is that the average mining company is less dangerous than the average company on the entire JSE. So in the JSE, let me just go up here. These are the sectors. And so we have 264 indicators, and we use 114 of those indicators to calculate what we refer to as the Sustainability Data Transparency Index score. And you can see that the industry with the highest SDTI score, so the greatest level of sustainability data transparency, are the companies in the metals and mining sector, then health and pharmaceuticals, banking and credit services, energy and natural resources, transportation, general industrials, and then food and beverage. And so there is room for improvement in all of these things, because like if you look here, even if I go to construction materials and equipment, the highest score for construction is 65.35%. But these guys have massive environmental and social impacts or potential impacts. And so metals and mining, 88.16. They report so much data because they're known to be higher social and environmental impact companies. So let me, oops, sorry. Go back. Okay. Okay, so SETI mining. So again, this is the lost time injury frequency rate. Okay. So on this again, you see that the highest is 1.106, or 1.106 out of every 100 people got injured to the point of losing at least one day during the year. But now, have a look at this. These are the top 6 retail companies. And these top 6 retail companies all have a lost time injury frequency rate greater than the highest lost time injury frequency rate in the metals and mining sector. And anybody want to venture a guess as to why? How is it possible that a grocery store is more dangerous than a gold mine? It's because they don't view themselves as dangerous. Mining companies have been well taught about the dangers of mining, the physical dangers of mining. And so they know to look out for hazards and risks, whereas retailers think it's safe. Where people, like one of the companies there, this ShopRite, over a 5-year period, ShopRite had an average of 5 fatalities per year, more than any of the mining companies in South Africa. And it was contractors working in their distribution centers, driving forklifts like maniacs, crashing into big storage shelving units and having things fall down from great heights. There was plenty of reason why there's all sorts of fatalities. But the thing is, unless this information is in the public domain and someone draws attention to it, people don't understand the risk. And so now people are paying attention to this. So who's using this information more than anybody else now? Responsible investors. And responsible investors want to know that the data is accurate. And that's where you come in. This is where an effective assurance provider can add real value to protecting shareholder wealth, particularly the long-term investors like the pension funds and such. This is where assurance adds value. And so I know we're at our time. Are there any additional questions? Well, from my side, I hope this was helpful. I think I'm just going to pass back to Virendra because for those of you who haven't yet heard, I'll be in India next week and the following week, and we're working together in partnership with Virendra and his colleagues to provide the CSAP training in Delhi next week and then Mumbai the following week. So I'm really looking forward to coming across and meeting folks. While I'm there, if you're not going to be taking a course, but you are wanting to meet up, and if you have any other questions, please feel free to contact me, and we can set up a time for one of the days after the course. That would be great.
Yeah. So thank you, Michael, for again consecutively second time conducting the webinar at the discomfort place, the hospitals. And again, it's showing the very high commitment towards the all of us, the people, and towards the commitment towards the sustainability community as well. So thank you for that. And for all the people, like just we were mentioning that we are arranging one training program, which is the CSAP training. So this is basically the CSAP, A Associate CSAP. That is what the training what we are arranging. And this is based on the accountabilities AA1000 standard. And this is happening in person in India for the very first time. And once this training program is successfully completed, the person's name also get reflected on the accountabilities website as well as a certified practitioner. And these are the training schedules. It is happening next week in Delhi, 23, 24, and 25 July at Radisson Blu, Delhi, near to Delhi Airport. And in the last week of July, that is 29, 30, and 31st July, it is happening in Mumbai at Novotel near to International Airport. So, so this is the fee structure, and we will share you this QR code and the registration details over the email. Those who have participated, feel free to contact us back. Those who are looking for any more clarifications, and also those who are looking for the participation in the training as well. And as Michael shared, apart from if you are participating or not participating, you can definitely
Voice is not audible.
Yeah, I've lost him as well. So I think what he was just saying there before he lost his signal is that, but please feel free to reach out if you have any more questions. We'll set up some time. I know that Tuesday I'm in Delhi and I'm available all day. So if anybody wants just to have a meet and greet, and if you have any specific questions you want to discuss, I'm totally open to that. You should have my email address by now. But you can also contact me via WhatsApp.
Yeah. So,
okay, cool.
Yeah, so sorry, I think Viren just left out. There might be some network issue. So so what Viren was sharing is we are having training on 23rd, 24th, and 25th in Delhi. And if anyone wants to register, we have sent a email registration link on the chat box. So please do check it out. And since this was the last webinar of the series, so we'll be meeting on the training. I hope many of you will be seeing you there. And if anyone is not available for the Delhi program or is not going to come, there is one also in the Mumbai that is on 29, 30, and 31st. And both the webinars will be led by our esteemed guest, Mr. Michael. So I hope we'll see you all there. So that was all for today. Thank you for joining, and let's meet in the trainings. Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, for leading this webinar, even when you are in this condition and having back-to-back surgeries and all.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
All good.
Okay. So I'll end this meeting, and if anyone wants to ask anything, we and our RSJ team will be there for another 2-3 minutes.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's it. The webinar is formally over. Thank you all. Thank you again for joining and helping us in this times. Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.